The house I grew up in was right next to a set of busy railroad tracks. From my bedroom window, I could watch the train roll by. There were three types of trains that used these tracks, and still to this day. There were the long, lumbering freight trains pulling boxcars, flatbeds, and tankers, which I could try and count when they had to clatter by. Then there were the fast-moving commuter trains in the Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, aka the MATA, or the M as some people call it. An armed truck passenger train that would breeze by, heading to and from the central stations of the heart of the city. Now, when most people see trains, they just see a big machine rolling by or down ribbons of steel. But me, I saw trains as a symbol of freedom and a way out of the hood. Whenever I saw a train, I would imagine all the places I would go to and come from. Naturally, my favorite toys at the tyke were my Thomas the Tank Engine toys. I had all the characters: Thomas, Percy, Gordon, James, Toby, Daisy, all of them. When I was 10, my grandparents bought me a Lionel train set for my birthday. To me, it was the best present ever. It consisted of a steam engine and 4 passenger cars. There were even a small bottle of drops that you put in the smokestack that allows the engine to make smoke. I spent hours watching the train run around this oval, pretending it was real and I was driving a locomotive through forests, past fields, across mountains, and past small towns. I eventually developed other interests, namely girls, but I still have my interest in trains. When I got older, I applied for a job as an engineer trainee at MATA, and I got it. For me, it was a dream come true. After I took the required classroom courses and exams, I soon found myself riding the cab in a sleek diesel engine that pulled the commuter trains. Now, the way the trainee program was set up is when they have you ride at different lines of the system for a few months with a regular engineer. I'll be on the line for the next few weeks, and then I'll be assigned to another line in order to familiarize myself with a different route. The M has 8 routes, all numbered. The main line is line 1, and all the branches line up to line 2, line 3, and so on. I started on line 7 in the first few weeks before being moved to line 8. Now, line 8, or Culverton line, as some people call it, is also the longest branch line in the system, second only to line 2, aka the Millersport line. The first time I rode the line 8, I was with a veteran engineer named Hank. Now, Hank has been with the company from the beginning, when the old railroad decided they wanted out of the money-losing community service, and handed over the locomotives and rolling stocks to MATA. We had a night owl service, which started at 7 p.m. and ends at 5 in the morning. We picked up a few first passengers in the central station and were soon on our way to Cloverton. As we were going down the tracks, Hank turned to me and said, "There's something you should know. If we're going to be working on the railroads, especially if they decide to put you on the line 8 once they make you an official engineer." I looked at him and said, "Oh, and what's that?" Hank paused to blow the horn of the crossing and then said, "This line is haunted." "Haunted? How is the line haunted?" Hank looked at me and said, "It supposedly started with a curse. Back in late 1800s, when one of the old railroad companies were building the line, the company built the line across the edge of the old farmer that belonged to a man named Ezra Gray, without his permission, of course. Ezra demanded that the railroad remove the tracks from his property and relate it for somewhere else, but the railroad refused, due to its cost too much and the time and money to do so. Mr. Gray did try to sue the railroads, but was not successful. You see, the railroads were quite powerful back in those days, and the railroad had a lot of politicians and judges in their pockets. To add insult to injury, Ezra not only had to pay the court costs, but had to pay the railroad as well, for all the money they spent on the legal proceedings. This actually bankrupted Ezra, and he was forced to sell the farm, minus a small patch of land that the track was built on. And Ezra Gray vowed to get even one way or another. When the line later opened up, Ezra stood on the tracks in front of the first train. The engineer tried to stop in time, but Ezra was hit anyway. Before he died, Ezra cursed the line, saying that it brings death and sorrow. Ever since then, there were a lot of mishaps and accidents in these tracks, and many people lost their lives. It is believed that some of those who died haunt this very spot, and that a few trains have crashed over the years, come back as ghost trains, still rolling around their very rail we're on now. Have you seen any of these ghost trains? Plenty. I've seen everything from headless tradesmen to phantom lights and ghost trains. I didn't believe him at first, but didn't say anything. We eventually came to a curve in the tracks, and when we came out of it, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Coming at us was a headlight of another train. Hank, for God's sakes, man, put the brakes on! Don't you see there's another train coming our way? Yeah, I see it. Don't worry, we'll be fine. Are you crazy? We're about to die! No, we're not. He pointed straight ahead. Get a good look at that train. I did, and not only did I saw the engine that was on the older type diesels, like one of those photos of movies and TV shows from the 50s and 60s, but it seemed to be the transparent shadow with the headlights and light cab windows. What the? I started to say, but then the shadow train hit us. Well, not exactly hit us, more like passed through us. Our whole cab was surrounded by shadows. Streaks in the light and what looked like a passenger's train passed through. And I swear I saw the pale, whispery figures of people sitting in their seats. Soon the train was gone and the engine room in our cab was normal. What the hell was that? I exclaimed. That was the ghost train I was talking about. Well, what's the story with that ghost train? Well, it all happened shortly after MATA was established and took over the commuter rail lines. An evening inbound train had crested along grade we're on right now when it lost control and ran away, all downhill before crashing and piling up on the curve at the bottom. Everyone on board was killed, and the cause of it? Well, they blamed the wreck on the aging equipment at MATA when using back then. Heck, with only a few exceptions, most of the engines MATA got from the railroad were only 25 to 30 years old, and about 30% of the coach used were even older. Not long after, the ghost of that train started making appearances along these stretch of tracks, became one with several other ghost trains that haunt these rails. I looked at him, then in front of the window of the engine. What about the people back in the cars? Do they think they saw what we saw? He just shrugged and said, Probably, but I'm sure most of them are used to it, so I wouldn't worry too much. Our conductor is probably taking care of that right now. We continued to Culverton and arrived on time. We made runs back and forth all night, and several times I saw some of the scariest things that Hank told me about. I was relieved when we finally tied up in the yard, leaving the coaches on one side of the side tracks, and put the engine in the roundhouse. The next few nights, however, were hell for me. Every night run, I had at least a few creepy encounters along line 8, all of them with Hank, who would just shrug them off as if it was nothing. But I guess that after nearly 40 years, none of the ghosts bothered him anymore. After a few days, I was put on the day runs, which was a relief to me, and I didn't have to worry about seeing ghost trains or headless trainmen ever again. I eventually became a regular engineer and was put on the main line run. I'm pretty content, but if the big wigs from the M ever decide to put me on line 8 9-hour services, I'll quit.